sure it's recording. Oh, okay. Okay, so this is Sprint 105 review. Let's get started. So I'm going to do the sprint statistics. Carol's going to do the community update. Harpreet is going to do UI. Adam providers. Tina automate. Gregg on platform. Chris documentation. Next slide. So here's the top 10 repos that had the amount of PRs merged, and integration tests came out on top this sprint. And we had 177 PRs merged. And that shows up here as well, which is an increase over the last sprint. And here's the distribution of the PRs across all the repos, and it's just typical. As always, we see usually bug enhancement switch sometimes. So, and for the health report, almost nothing changed except for Ansible Tower, just went up by 1 point, but everything else just remained the same. And over to Carol.
Hello, thanks, John. All right, so for the community update, we had our Hammer 2 release a couple of weeks ago. Actually, yeah, 2 weeks ago. So that's that. And a couple of updates to the website, thanks to Eric. First, the responsive design, especially for the blog section, has been much improved. So it looks better not just on the desktop, but also on mobile. And the Hammer docs are also now included in the documentation section of the website. So please take a look. And I think that's all for this week. Thanks. And next slide, please.
Hello, everyone. So we had a total of 29 UI PRs merged during the sprint. Out of that, 13 were bug fixes, 7 enhancements, and so on. There were several bugs fixed, but I have a few of them listed here. So when performing an action from the container provider dashboard screen, such as a recheck of authentication status, or there were a couple of others. So the flash message was not being displayed, so that issue got fixed. And a fix was made to load hourly metrics charts on container dashboard utilization metrics. Previously, there was an infinite spinner when there was no daily data available. So that got fixed. And on Ansible Tower and Foreman provider edit screens, when there are no visible zones available, instead of just showing a text box marked with red as a required field, now it explicitly shows a message to indicate user that there are no visible zones found in the current region. And on the catalog bundle edit screen, now change was made to exclude so that user cannot add a bundle inside a bundle. And finally, a fix was made to not allow power operations for a template. Next slide, please. On enhancements side, I have screenshots for most of the items listed here. So I'll probably skip this slide, but the only bullet that doesn't have a screenshot is the one to add back paging options. Now we have added back options to be able to view 200 or 500 items per page on the list views. Next slide, please. So on the user edit screen, as you can see next to password field, there used to be links to allow change, or while changing the password, there was a link to cancel the password change. Now those are converted to the buttons. Next slide, please. Some of our forms have dual lists to move items from left to right and vice versa. So a dual list React component is introduced to better manage pristine and dirty states on the form when items are moved back and forth. As you can see here, the reset button is highlighted based upon the changes. Next slide, please. List navigation was added to embedded Ansible playbook repository and credentials summary screens. It used to be blank space on the left on the summary screens. So that was added. And next slide, please. On the V2V side, a new screen was added to show a basic list of conversions hosts with pagination, filtering, and sorting support. Next slide, please. So the next two slides show changes to conversion host configuration wizard. This one has a step one where a user can select a location of conversion host based upon provider type, provider, and a cluster. Next slide, please. And on this step two, a user can select multiple hosts to be configured as conversion hosts. And that's all I have. Thanks. On to Adam.
Thanks, Harpreet. So on the provider side, this sprint, VMware led with 12 merged PRs, followed by Overt and OpenStack. Next slide, please. VMware, we were doing a lot of work this sprint to get classic refresh and graph refresh to be essentially exactly compatible with each other, so that you can turn one on and then switch to the other one, and it shouldn't change any of the records. So trying to target getting graph refresh turned on by default for the next release. And you can see a lot of PRs emerged around that area. On the Overt side, we fixed some bugs with targeted host refresh causing duplicates with switches and LANs. Essentially, when it was targeting the host, it wasn't including existing switches and LANs in the referenced collection, so it was creating new ones when it didn't find them, and then it would delete those on the next full refresh. And there was also a fix for graph refresh switch handling for Overt before they were incorrectly sharing switches between hosts, which was not compatible with the previous classic refresh. Next slide. On the Amazon side, Alex updated the list of instance types and regions, and so you can see the ones which are added there, and so those should be available now. And on Ansible Tower, Martin S. updated the targeted refresh for Ansible to be more in line with the rest of the providers. Ansible was early on in graph refresh, targeted refresh handling, and so had kind of a unique implementation of it. And now it's consistent with the rest of the providers. And that's it. Over to Tina.
Thanks, Adam. Good morning. We had 7 PRs merged this sprint. Our best fit, least utilized automate methods use the writable storages method to help determine placement. Since a new writable accessible storages method is available, Drew redirected the writable storage method exposed in service models to use the writable accessible storage method, which is great because existing automate methods don't have to be modified. Our service dialog option keys are strings. The API sends them as symbols when ordering a service from a global region. Lucy changed the dialog processing for stack parameters to allow symbols for the time being. Scheduled retirement is run in the system context. We attempt to use the object's EVM owner during scheduled retirement and encountered an issue where the object had an EVM owner that had been previously deleted. Drew added code to ensure the EVM owner is valid, defaulting to superadmin when it's invalid. We supply the user group and tenant objects to automate what makes them available to automate methods. When a user does lifecycle provisioning, the logged-in user is considered the provision requester. We found a discrepancy between the requester and the user pass to automate. Drew resolved this issue by changing the way we populate the user pass to automate. That's it for automate. Next slide and over to Greg.
All right, thanks, Tina. There were 15 PRs merged this sprint in the platform space. Some of the highlights are Brandon made an enhancement to MIQ password to exclude encrypted methods from encrypted columns list. Methods like password encrypted. So the password is the encrypted one. The other one's a method. Libor extracted a stable sort by method from root port so that it can be called from other places, like the REST API, eventually. Next slide, please. Yuri fixed a bug where the user time zone setting was not honored for date fields on reports, and instead defaulted to UTC. Nick Lamoro fixed the bug where memory threshold setting values stored as strings were not honored, which could sometimes cause workers to get stuck in a restart loop if the way it was interpreted was too low. And Joe R fixed a 500 error when logging in that was caused by 2 threads simultaneously auto-loading classes at the same time. If you ask him, he'll say it's a constant problem. Next slide, please. That's it for platform.
Hi, for documentation in this sprint, we had a total of 10 PRs merged, 9 of which addressed enhancements. 1 was a bug. 2 of the big highlights of this sprint are we've added revisions to the configuring central administration that specifies what can and can't be accomplished under a regular setup and some instructions on functions that differ. And additionally, we've added some edits to the installation and configuration procedures in the high availability guide that were based on some testing that was performed in conjunction with consulting at the last hackathon. That's it. Next slide, please.
Okay, so that closes Sprint 105. And the next one is in 2 weeks on March 6th, 106. Thank you.